Treat all the problems for you guys.
That's
on the
right.
council. That's what it told me the job was.
Yeah. They told you that your job, create problems for the city council.
First one on the planning commission, Vince was our chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
grab that. I can speak pretty loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant. Didn't care since he left.
Did you read the whole thing? Did you read the whole quote?
They read it.
But you cruised it.
Some of it, some of it. I perused it. And then I went off and left it. Sat on the desk at work.
Right.
Cause I have another book with here 4:45 today, so.
Oh, did you just walk in?
Yes.
Yeah, it's long.
I just, we ran out of time and I forgot.
Yeah.
I'll stay for this and just be done with this.
There's usually.
Give me some, like, use them about that.
So he'll still.
There's a lot of great stuff. in
That
it,
way.
though, just generally about our city, stats, demographics, cool stuff like that.
I think it's important that we get this right. It will impact our ability to grow. And if you're not growing, you're dying. Yeah.
That's just all of those days.
Yeah, almost every single company or city or anybody that tried to manage their way out of something. ended up
Wow.
Okay, folks, it's 6 o'clock. I'm gonna call to order our joint city council and planning commission workshop. This is to discuss the land quantity needs analysis that's being conducted by the CPS Alliance. It's gonna be a discussion, open discussion about the studies, very, very detailed, lots of great data. Brett's gonna pick this out. Real quick though, councilman or councilwoman Barr is gonna be a little bit late. Councilmember. We have couple new folks here, one new folk, Sean Ricketson's new appointed planning commission member. Thanks for being here. Welcome. And let's just go around and take it so everybody in the crowd knows who we are. So, say, planning commission.
My name's Sean Ricketson, I'm planning commission, I work out of Fairchild, I use support out there, and so I'm doing evenings to fill my time.
He needs to get something else to do to fill his time. And then I'm coming up, so, I'm Rick Mount, I am a member of the, Cheney, Planning Commission, not sure how long I've been on it. But I came on before Mayor Grover took his seat. Vince was the chair, and I think everybody on the planning commission, except for, Mr. Turbyville, is new since I came onto the planning commission. So I'm an attorney at Holly Troxel. I live here in Cheney, but work in Spokane.
All right, I'm Mark Postuma and I'm a city council member.
Jason Azaro, city council member.
Dan Turby, planning commission. Grover Mayor. Vince Bartel, city council.
Ron Valencia, planning commissioner.
Tasha Jostad, Planning Commission.
And Jackie Belock, city council.
And thank you all for being here. It's, our normal schedule for meeting, but. it's very important. That, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Lucas.
Just welcome tonight to our joint planning commission city council meeting, workshop. Again, this is really a high level meeting to discuss the, recent findings for the land quantity needs analysis. That's being completed for the city. Again, we're looking at basically a 20-year horizon based on population projections of what our needs are going to be for land and for residential and employment growth. Again, tonight's going to be a 30,000 foot elevation look at the city. While this is informational, no decisions are being made tonight. Probably information to feedback to the consultant as part of working through a comprehensive plan update over the next couple of years. With that, I also would like to, so we have students in here from EW tonight, or EW Planning 507, senior, or excuse me, graduate class. So they're here tonight to everything here. And then with that, I'd like to welcome Aaron McCarr with SCJ Alliance to start the presentation. And we shared Mark, or do I need to share?
Yeah, here goes.
Check here. All right, awesome. Thanks, sir.
Hi, everyone. Let's see, we've got everything up here. Okay, there we go. All right, as Brett said, my name is Aaron Mercar. Hired by the city. I work for SCJ Alliance. I'm a planner. Work work on these types of studies, land capacity analyses. So I think most of you have seen some of this before I came and spoke to this. Refinements that we've made tonight and try to focus on the findings and recommendations as they stand today. So I'll give a brief overview of what we did for this project for those that aren't familiar, and then we can get into some of the findings. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. This is just a copy. So we have, what is a land quantity analysis, sometimes referred to as land capacity analysis or a buildable land. So really what it is a method of determining how much land within the city and the UGA is buildable. We're looking at, it's a capacity exercise to determine the need for changes in land use policy as you look towards planning for the next 20 years, which is why this is happening prior to the comprehensive plan update. So I think these are kind of illustrative diagrams here, just showing, okay, you might have so much land in each zone, but once you account for your critical areas, your need for public facilities and roads, you're really dwindling that down quite a bit into what's actually, what are the parcels you can actually build on. So that's what we are taking a look at citywide, find out how much room the city has to grow and make some recommendations based on that. So why are we doing this here? How will this help? So the study, it provides that baseline for making those decisions about the future, especially as going into this next periodic comprehensive plan update. Your guys' is due in June of 2026. So we've got a couple of years to work on that. And the recommendations from this report will help provide that guidance for future policy decisions and compliance. So this is going to inform the comprehensive planning process, what you're going to your community to ask what they want to see in the next 20 years, based in these constraints that we're finding this. So what's in this report? This report goes beyond just the buildable lands analysis, which is what we're going to focus on tonight mainly, but we did do a brief community profile overview, which was looking at demographics, housing, just different data sets that we can find about the city. So there's a lot of information and data in the report about that, which will also inform the comprehensive plan and kind of give a step up there, because that's a big piece of the comprehensive planning process. It also has a housing needs analysis. So that's a big piece of the buildable lands, as we're looking at how much housing can we actually accommodate? How much housing do we actually need? So where do those line up? We're looking at the buildable lands, so specifically how much land, and using that GIS analysis to determine actual acres on the ground in different zones. So that's the buildable lands analysis piece. We also have an economic opportunities analysis piece. So that looks at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT analysis of facing Cheney today. So what are the opportunities economically to grow here? And how does that relate to buildable land too? How much land do you have to accommodate jobs? And then finally, we have a recommendations piece. That's how this report ends. So we're looking at what are the findings and how does that translate into what should the city focus on or study further as you go forward into the comprehensive plan. So one of the main factors that we start with is what's the population projection. So this is an update since last time we talked as well. The PTAC committee for Spokane County recently came out with their kind of initial projections for how much growth each community within the county needs to accommodate. And they placed Cheney at a population of these aren't quite official yet, but they're in draft form, and they feel pretty confident that this is probably the direction they'll go. And if it changes, it probably won't be by much, but a population projection of 16,535 by 2046. And I think that where we have today, we're just over 13,000. So a significant amount of population to accommodate 3,000 plus in the next 20 or so years. So that's a significant amount, and we have to look at how we're going to actually accommodate that in the next 20 years. The Department of Commerce also provides this Housing for All planning tool, which came out last year, which is a method basically of assigning housing units to communities based on these population projections. So looking at they assign a number to each county and say, this is how much housing this county needs to accommodate by your target year. And if we're selecting 2046, they're looking at what's the percentage, you plug in your percentage, so that it's the same percentage of population that Cheney has to accommodate. So it was like 3.3% of the county growth over the next 20 years. So we plug that into how many housing units they're saying the county needs to accommodate, and we get 2,534 housing units by 2046. It also breaks these down into specific income categories based on area median income. It found that 64% of these new units need to serve individuals with incomes at or below 80% of AMI, area median income. So that's a significant amount of the new housing that needs to serve lower income populations. What does that mean? So we're looking at this table, or the diagram on the bottom here shows the various types of housing that might align with different income types. So we're looking at apartments, multiplexes, and what is being referred to as middle housing these days, which is really kind of anything between that's not a single family home or a large apartment building. So that's what we're looking to accommodate. And those are the types of housing that typically can accommodate lower income households. So if we're looking at 64% of these homes need to be for 80% AMI or below. I think 64% at a minimum of new housing units should be middle housing classified. So it just really emphasizes that need for middle housing. Yes, so the way that the state's defining middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplexes, sixplexes, courtyard apartments, cottage clusters, and so our just kind of overview of methodology here and how you go about a buildable lands analysis is first of all defining what's buildable and not buildable. So you take all your land in the city and say, okay, not buildable is what's developed and is not going to change over the next 20 years. And then what's not going to change. Yeah, in your horizon. And then critical areas. So those are the other main things. So your environmental constraints. Wetlands, at least it's not a good idea to, and steep slopes, other things that the city has defined as critical areas. You're going to then take the rest of that and say, this is our buildable land, and categorize that into 3 different types. And this is a methodology defined by Spokane County. They identify and define vacant land, so that's not developed, and that would be new development that would go on that land. Underutilized properties, which are potential for redevelopment. So those are lands that have more probability of redeveloping. And then partially utilized. So these are parcels that have structure or development on them, but have significant room to still, they could potentially subdivide, or there's infill potential there. So you define those 3 types of land, and then you take your total analysis or your total number by zone, and you deduct everything. You take a deduction factor for roads, for market factors, for public facilities, anything that's going to cause that land to not develop. So in this case, I think we took 65% because we just assumed that you need typically 20 to 30% for roads, 20% for public facilities, and that could be parks, schools, utilities, anything like that. And then also a market factor, which is just this is a certain percentage we're taking off that's just not going to develop due to market reasons. So then you filter all that out and get your total net development capacity. And then you compare that against this housing and population demand that we're getting from the county, and saying, how do these compare? We also have to make some significant assumptions, and that's a big piece of this, of a buildable lands analysis. So we're really making based on some regional and best practices, things that we've discussed closely with city staff, and just looked at other jurisdictions on what they are using. So those definitions of buildable and non-buildable lands are some of those assumptions. Vacant land was any parcel that has a assessed value of $5,000 or lower. And that was what the county uses. So that's what we're saying. We're just going to assume that that's our definition for the sake of this exercise. We're also making some assumptions about reduction factors. Again, that is a piece based on best practices and what other buildable lands analyses have used. And we're making some assumptions about land use type densities for housing and employment. So when we're comparing how much capacity certain land has for housing units and employment, we're making a certain assumption about the density of housing units and employees, housing units per acre, employees per acre. And some of that is defined in the code for some zones. It's specifically, maximum 20 units per acre. but that's not well defined for like employees per acre, so we're having to look at for using certain land uses, the comprehensive plan defines a range of what the density could be. So we're looking at that as well and saying, okay, well, we'll just assume the maximum of this range is what we're is what this land use could accommodate. So some of our findings. Before I dive into this, any questions about methodology or anything we've done so far?
So in determining what our housing needs are, what data is used to determine whether they're going to be, single family homes to apartment complexes? How do you come up with the data that tells us that's what we're gonna need?
So I guess
You're saying we 2,500 housing units. What data is used to determine what kind of housing units are going to be included in that 2,500?
that's based on the Housing for All planning tool, and that's the one breaking it down into that 2,500 units, breaking it down into a 0 to 30% AMI, 30 to 50, etc. That's based on
It's just a-
Commerce's
It's just a guess,
division.
because that's what Commerce does, is just a guess, right?
I mean, that's as much as I know, that's, yeah, I don't know exactly how they divide that up, but, some backing to it, but I don't know what that is.
Other things, or what are those percentages? So current market.
I think it looks at your existing housing stock. And
Median income.
And it's great to look at past for future in some things. I don't think that's the case here. Because I think our past has been dictated by some bad decisions about previous administration. And so they're taking that data and saying, oh, well, yeah, we're just going to continue that out. Because bad decisions were made by previous administrations to just make the whole city of Cheney multi-dwelling. And that's what's happened, and then we're using the same data. I'm a data person. I want to know what we're basing it on, to know what we need to, to actually look at and build, so that we can try to get people to build what we need, not what the Department of Commerce, who, in my opinion, is so out of touch with things. They don't know what the city of Cheney needs. You add in Spokane County, to me, that's a real poor addition to what we need here in Cheney. So I'm looking for data that's really talks about what we need here, what people want here, that's going to draw people to the community.
So when I was reading the report, you break down in the very beginning all of our demographics. I'm assuming you took that into consideration while you were looking at that tool to get a more specific Cheney sort of outlook.
yeah, so the findings and recommendations specific for Cheney, and we've worked through that with city staff, and I think that this Housing for All planning tool is one of the things that we have to at least pay attention to, because it is coming from the Department of Commerce, but we do have an entire section of housing needs analysis, and our recommendations are based on both. And we're saying, okay, if this is the target that Commerce is setting for us, we can reach that in ways that still set policies and recommendations that still are applicable to Cheney, and by some policies that they're recommending statewide. We're not gonna have those same policies here. This is just, it's like a overall number. And they give, so this housing for all planning tool provides the estimated housing supply by AMI category. So I think they're looking at where, I think it's looking at where there's deficiencies and saying, okay, you don't have a significant amount of housing in this, 0 to 30% range. So they're adding a lot to that.
And I understand that, but that doesn't tell me how they got that number. And so when I see a bunch of numbers, it doesn't mean anything to me unless you give me the data that tells me how they came up with the amount that they think in these particular categories. I didn't see anything in what you provided to us previously and what we've gone through that tells me how that number was obtained. I know you're using some formula that's been developed, but that doesn't tell me how the formula was actually developed. And if I'm gonna believe something, I wanna see how you got there. I don't wanna,
I understand that. Yeah.
I'm just not gonna believe a conclusion of somebody who developed a program, you know, on the west side of the state or in Washington, DC. I want to know what the data is that comes up with that particular information that says this is what we need in our community. I'm not disputing it. I'm just telling.
No, that's
show me
it.
the data that, how you figure that out.
That's a fair question. And I think that that's something we can check with Department of Commerce and say, this is a concern of the community. Can you provide, an answer of how this is, how your allocation is spread out across these various income ranges? This is a new tool, so I think they probably will welcome insight and feedback. But the way that it's set up is it's not clear how exactly that number's reached.
Thanks, Karen. I forgot to mention. It's the workshop between council and planning, so I wasn't expecting people to comment here. But thank you, I appreciate it.
One quick question on the forecast as well. You can present maybe 4 different forecasts a year and then just a new one here. That's 16,535. Is your plan to average the 5 to come up with a percent for the final report?
Can
Forecast.
forecast for, oh, the,
Presented a slide early on that said in 2046, the projection 16,000.
yes,
535. That's new. That's not
yes,
in.
yep.
One by OFM. And it looked like you were going to the mid-range in this year.
Oh, you're talking about the low, middle and high ranges for the OFM.
For the forecast.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is new and it's not updated in the report yet. This is new from PTAC. So I updated this presentation and the analysis findings to reflect that. So that, because this is where the county's headed, that's probably the forecast.
Higher versus an average.
Well, yes, because that's likely what's going to be allocated by Spokane County. And that's the number that we have to pay attention to. I think that there's probably room for city to have conversations with the county on that, if that's something that we feel is unrealistic. But that's just where. It's like that process.
Challenging, the population forecast right now is a work in progress as we with county officials are working through the numbers. We're also doing this land quantity needs analysis kind of on parallel track. So we're updating this land quantity needs analysis as we get this new population numbers to feed that to there. I think that
So if we wanted to look at how much middle housing you could accommodate just based on your current zoning today. So if we're saying this, that we need to accommodate, 64% of new homes should be a middle housing type. With your current zoning, 67% of new housing, if you filled in all that zoning, could be middle housing. So that's a good thing that it's already there, that you can allow a lot of middle housing. Doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room. So that's what the top table is showing. And then the bottom table is showing based on future land use designation. So what the land could potentially be zoned to accommodate higher densities. If you did that citywide and updated or upzoned everything to the highest that it could be able to have 77% of new housing be in that middle housing category. These are generalizations because I think that there are some zones and land uses where you can have light multifamily, you could have, duplexes and a single family zone and things like that. So it's not entirely detailed, but it is a generalization about just looking at the difference between your zoning today and the land use designations. So when we look at the residential capacity, so this is our comparison of the forecasts and capacity numbers. So residential capacity, 2,104 housing units. Then take out 206 units for just a corrective factor saying, okay, the ones that would redevelop, those people who live in those houses that redevelop would still stay in the community, and it's just kind of accounting for that. Those people would have to be rehoused, so that's not new population. So correcting for that, the housing that we can accommodate based on what the numbers we ran is 1,898. So comparing that to the, sorry, this is based on future land use. Yes. Yes, yes. And I did run the numbers for the zoning. Less than that. But it was maybe a couple hundred less than that. So this, the number that we have to reach is 2,534. So we're 636 short based on this run of the analysis. I think thing was coming in and I was trying to redo the analysis, but that final number is where. So looking at specifically one of the things that we wanted to look at is the urban growth area, and specifically growth area to the south of town. Because there's a lot of restrictions based on critical areas. So the UGA as it stands today can only accommodate 111 new households based on the buildable acres analysis. That's equivalent to approximately 1 year's worth of growth. So it's not really a valuable urban growth area to have when you're looking at 20 years of growth. And that's typically what you want in a UGA is say, this is land that we can annex to grow and accommodate future population. We also are looking at the employment capacity. So this was, these are based on some of those best practices of employees per acre. Estimating that Cheney in 2023 had 4,266 jobs. Based on analysis of the zoning and land use. Cheney has capacity for about 1,500 more jobs. And that's 36% more than today, so plenty if jobs grow at a similar rate to population. So that wasn't really a concern to say, oh, we really need to find more commercial and industrial land to accommodate jobs to support our population. It seems based on this analysis that we're doing okay in that department. However, again, if we look at just the urban growth area, we ran this analysis. Growth area can accommodate 72 jobs. So that's about, again, 1 year's worth of growth in jobs in the city. Just continues to make that strong case that maybe the UGA is something that we need to talk about further in this comprehensive plan. So then I'll get into a few recommendations here. The report makes a number of recommendations, and I'll talk 3 of them here. And these are where I welcome any feedback and discussion. But really, I mean, so we could continue to amend and tweak some of these numbers and, find that maybe look at something a little different than what the overall planning tool is telling us. I don't think, based on the assumptions that we've made, that it will change the overall analysis too much. I don't think that it will necessarily, those numbers weren't really right on the edge of saying, oh, we can accommodate growth. I mean, they're really saying that we need to look at options. So one option, this is a recommendation that was kind of based on that urban growth area analysis, is that city should look at amending the UGA. We don't propose exactly where, but this map does kind of show what the options are if we were to look at doing that. This shows county zoning outside of city limits. The dark green is large tract agriculture, and the pink is rural conservation. Both of those are not very conducive and would be a difficult sell to the county to add into the urban growth area, because both of those are reserved for resource lands and tidal conservation. So it looks like it would be a difficult sell to expand the urban growth area south or to the west. But that lighter green, that is the rural traditional. And that definition of county zoning does leave a little more flexibility for development. So that could be an option. That would also follow the 904 corridor. So that could be valuable to development to have access to that transportation system as well. Again, we didn't look at, specifically what the buildable lands outside of the city limits in UGA look like, but that could be something that's involved with the comprehensive plan update, is looking at what do we propose that urban growth area to be. Any thoughts, questions on this recommendation? This would be one of the options to accommodate additional growth. It'd be the option to expand the city. Some of the other options look at what can we do with our existing boundaries. So we can also talk after that, but I will move on to the next one for now. So this is that other option. So focusing on infill development, which we're defining as partially utilized and vacant land. So those were 2 land types that we defined in the buildable lands piece. And we're saying just those parcels north of the railroad. South of the railroad, you're really getting into difficulties with the city being able to serve that area. And you run into a lot more critical areas restrictions as well. So took that line and said anything to the north, that's what we're saying as infill. With that definition, under current zoning, you could accommodate 749 units. If you rezoned to the full potential of the land, it would accommodate 1,039 infill units. So it has potential to accommodate quite a significant amount of projected housing need here.
Can you tell me the infill units? What we'd have to change the zoning to be to increase that by approximately 300?
So that would be base, whatever the future land use map designates. So the future land use map in the comprehensive plan would allow you to zone up to. So say it's single family residential, but the future land use map designates it high density residential. So you could rezone that high density residential zone.
Thank you.
Ask a quick question. I'm looking at my figure 64. I realize this might be an older draft.
Yep.
But it looks like Weimar, you have a yellow star on your exhibit.
Yep.
That's
So that just signifies that I took that into account and added that into our potential for infill. So I took that out of, that was commercial before. So I took those, what it's zoned now, mixed use and high density residential, and included that in the infill analysis.
acres, we're only at 749 units.
Mhm.
What is the acreage all about?
I don't know. But I can find out.
And the criteria were vacant land. Like the north end of a 50-acre park. Again, I like these two exhibits. I like figure 64 and figure 28. I tried to compare them, but it seems like at least a portion of the 50-acre park was shown as vacant land in figure 28, but it doesn't show up on this map.
That's a good point. It might be that we took it out specifically because we're looking at that. We don't really know what is happening with that property right now. And if that has, as it exists right now, due to the RCO designation, it does not have that potential. So that might have been something that we took out, and I probably just missed taking it out of that other figure. But that's a good thing to know.
There's not a direct correlation between figure 28 and that's necessary.
But can you give me the name of figure 28?
That's.
Oh. Oh, the all buildable. Oh, okay. All buildable land. So we also, that one, this is just the residential designated land, the infill. So the all buildable lands, that's saying, okay, that's buildable based on our initial run at it. But then if we look at the underlying zoning, is it buildable for residential or commercial or industrial? And that particular property isn't developable for any of those. It would technically be like physically, but due to the land use regulations, it's not. So that was filtered out in that process. But it is buildable for like
It's zoned
constraints. What?
It's zoned residential.
But it's RCO designation currently. So yes. So unless we feel confident that that's going to change, we kept it out of the buildable lands analysis.
Also a couple properties right now in Cheney for sale. The land. That's not.
Yeah, we can, if you have, and I think that if there's other things that we know, we can add to this. I think it depends if it's gonna be, you know, if it's a significant amount of land that could have potential, especially if it's land that's zoned for higher density. I would caution getting too detailed because I think have a long ways to go in the comprehensive planning process. And these are just kind of the initial recommendations that this report isn't going to be
One quick question too. My assumption is a 50-acre park, we're not using any for housing, correct? Yeah, we can't. So why is it included in figure 28?
So that's the analysis based on looking at just the land and saying, does this land is it developed or does it have critical areas on it? If it's undeveloped and doesn't have critical areas on it, it's buildable as like physically you could build on that because there's nothing there and there's no critical area. But then if we dive deeper and say what's allowed on that land, then we start filtering some of those out. So that figure 28 is an iteration of buildable lands, and then we further filter out land from that.
So when you look at the one you're on there, you filtered it out, it looks like, I'm assuming, because it's not yellow.
Yep.
You filtered it out and came up with 1,039. Well, but you changed the number
Yep.
recently, so.
Yep.
Okay.
One other comment, I think both figure 28 and this figure 64, I think are great figures. And I think it would be helpful to try to break up this map into maybe 6 separate maps, kind of use this as like a sheet index, just so we can zoom in, see the individual parcels.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, and I do have a online version too, and with this PowerPoint has a link to it, so I can.
Does that have the GIS layers that you can play with? And it's perfect. That's exactly what you're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll make sure the updated infill layer is on there. So this recommendation focuses on infill, incentivizing upzoning and middle housing developments for those properties that we're considering infill as a way to accommodate a significant amount of population. If you just focus on this, still don't reach your target, but it gets you a lot closer if you allow that upzoning. And during the comprehensive planning process, you could also take a look at the future land use map and say, okay, well, before this area, last time we updated the comp plan, this area was, you know, we designated it single family, but you know, now we're seeing maybe it's more appropriate to allow higher density in this area. So that's something to explore. And just some of those incentives could be, you know, tax exemptions, utility hookup fees waived. So there's for infill development. I will note too that so all these yellow parcels, those are just the partially utilized and vacant land. So it's not including the underutilized land, and that's land that's already developed but has more potential based on the value of the development compared to the value of the land to redevelop. So you could say, okay, we expect a certain number of those parcels to redevelop too. Not saying it's just saying that infill as we're defining it here. More than that, even if you didn't do anything with the UGA. But we'd have to make some assumptions about how much we expect to actually redevelop.
think changing parking requirements is another one of the recommendations in the infill. Changing parking requirements for new development.
Yeah,
I know that. Oh, is that what you're hitting?
that's right.
Okay.
But I will.
I was just wanted to circle back. I know that's
Yeah.
probably a topic.
Yeah, for sure. So another of the recommendations focuses specifically on development regulations. So this is implementing, implementing this mixed use zone that you guys have in place. And ensure that those future land use designations in your comprehensive plan support accommodate the mixed use zone. So that would be a comp plan exercise and rezoning actions to accommodate mixed use. Could also amend development regulations, allowing for a wider variety of middle housing types throughout all zones. So that could be something, take a look at more detailed look at some of those lower density zones and say, okay, maybe, maybe some of these zones are appropriate for, duplexes, triplexes, up to a fourplex. Say, okay, well, maybe not, apartments or sixplexes, but fourplexes. We could see that. So again, that's something that probably want to do in the comprehensive planning process. Amending ADU regulations to comply with House Bill 1337, which requires allowing 2 ADUs per lot. We didn't accommodate, or we didn't look at accommodating any of those, the target housing through ADUs. It's hard to assume how many properties would actually put ADUs on their lot, but that's another way you could potentially get to that target number with infill. But that would be an assumption we have to make about how many ADUs we actually expect to develop in the city, even if we're allowing them.
You have a rough inventory on how many ADUs we have right now? That's the correct question.
And what are ADUs?
Sorry, that's accessory dwelling
Read
unit.
that small.
Yeah, I don't think I have it on there. It's a accessory dwelling unit. Yeah, no, it's not on there. Oh, no, it's really tiny though. Yep.
Generally less than 800 square.
Thank you. I know that's probably been explained, but I don't remember all.
Oh
of
yeah,
it.
no, that's fair. Sometimes I get lost in the planning terms and I need to realize that not everyone knows those. So another one is parking standards. So we could look at adjusting parking standards near high performance public transit stops and for those middle housing types. So that's just one strategy to potentially change the configuration that you can have with certain developments. You could fit more, potentially fit more units if you didn't require as much parking. That's just one way to look at it. And you want to be strategic about where you're applying that. And that's why we're saying just around that high capacity transit line that runs through town. Because those developments may rely less on having cars and could potentially get around easier since they're right on public transit. And then typically for middle housing, you have, I think, fewer trips per day for higher density housing, so per unit. So people relying less on vehicles. In town, or that's. And the last one on here is implementing upzoning in strategic areas and around those transit corridors. So redesignate land to accommodate higher densities, looking at what areas make sense for that. These other recommendations from the report, I didn't have as much to say about. They seemed in a more general sense, but I'll just read through them real quick, and if you guys want to touch on any of them, we can. So we're recommending incentivizing improvements to the quality and maintenance of housing. So that just speaks to making sure that the housing stock we do have today is maintained. Looking at diversifying the local economic base, and this comes out of the economic opportunities analysis. Just to keep Cheney on the right course for being able to be a regional economic destination. Connecting vulnerable populations with resources. So this is connect them with housing, connect them with resources to investigating a reduction of impact fees for infill projects. So that goes back to the infill, incentivizing infill. Coordinating with the university on land available for housing. But we know from talking with Eastern that they anticipate the number of beds they need on campus to stabilize, and they actually anticipate reducing the number of beds available right now, and that will remain that way for the foreseeable future. They are working on a strategic plan update this year, so that could be something that new information that we get for the comprehensive plan as well. But they do have a lot of land, and they have a lot of buildable land, but because of its zoning designation and because it's Eastern, it's not something the city can rely on for accommodating development. So we recommend maybe just coordinating with Eastern on if there's potential there. And then another recommendation is engage in regional developing marketing materials to promote opportunities in Cheney. So if we want to attract development and economic opportunities, we need to make sure we're marketing the city and providing, connecting potential developers with land. Pursuing funding opportunities as well. So that's always a big one. I think we provide a few more details in the report. But there's a lot of funding available right now for middle housing, for example. But that would be something to look at. And then finally, improving pedestrian safety and connectivity. So some of these go a little beyond, just a buildable lands analysis, but if you're looking at accommodating higher densities, you want to look at, the bigger picture too, and say, how are people getting around the community? How are they staying safe as they get through the city? And are we making sure that our new developments are accommodating for that safety and connectivity? Any other thoughts on this? I do have. Sorry, here's the map slide in here.
Forecasting projections, are they also taking into consideration the amount of water? in the area and what that can support, knowing that we're in prolonged drought and our forecast water-wise is not as pleasant as our forecast pollution wise. Is that taken into consideration?
We did not take that into consideration in the buildable lands, but I think that's something to visit in the comprehensive plan update. You're just thinking like, is this actually buildable if we don't have?
Right. We say that we need this, but do we have the capacity to accommodate that, not just in buildable lands, but in natural resources?
We didn't look at that in this, but I think it's an important thing to consider.
Comprehensive plan process is a very process. That's just. I looked at this. If we're talking about house. Outreach, a lot of in the city.
Yeah. I bet you could do some
Oh, I'm sure.
Say-
I can find
well, and
it.
say,
I just thought about that, or if that's what you had. Yeah, I know where to get the information.
yeah, yeah.
It's bad enough. That'll help a lot, yeah.
Any questions for Aaron and wait, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I didn't want to jump in, but so when you have a comprehensive plan, we have our comprehensive water plan that we do every 6 to 10 years. And that's based on the model and projection.
And is that looking at climate, future climate trends and?
Trends, pretty much drawdowns on our wells. That's really reason why we're pushing the purple pipe, because we do have some of that.
I think that's a good point about looking at the industrial land and saying, if we're not worried about land for accommodating employment or economic development, could some of that land be used to accommodate residential? That is another option. Absolutely. So the numbers that I presented tonight are not in the report that was sent out to you because I updated based on the new feedback numbers. But I will update those in the report as well. Yeah, I think we're getting, the end of this process and really want this to inform how we're going to transition into the comprehensive plan process. I think that will happen this year sometime.
Yep.
That came out of Senate, that bill for land
Yeah.
swaps.
It's unanimous out of the Senate, gonna give us a little bit more opportunity for UGA land swaps and things. So, I spoke to our lobbyist today and she's gonna contact the chair of the House and hopefully be hearing on the House side. So, but it's great that it came out unanimous and consent.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Build on well.
Question.
Yep.
The information you got from the county, they factored in any of the growth going on in Fairchild over the next 2 to 3 years?
The population numbers, is that,
In general, right, they're expanding the fleet out there from 15 to 75 aircraft. That's a pretty big jump. It's got 1,000 more personnel. Those people would want a place to live, kids go to school, things like that.
do you know, Brett? Because I don't know if that was Fairchild just incorporated into the unincorporated county or if it's treated as a separate, yeah.
You know, some people live on base, you know, go to base housing, with off base. Community.
Brett, my understanding is the base has no more housing available. So if they're bringing in 1,000 more personnel, there's gonna be a lot more need for actual houses. When I sat on the Cheney, or in the West Plains Chamber, they weren't looking for apartments, they were looking for homes. That's what their people wanted, was looking at, at a home that they could purchase. And Fairchild, in order to be able to help with that process, has continued to try to expand their alert time, because they have to be on base when an alert is sounded. They have to be on base within a certain period of time. So it used to be a lot smaller, and they've kind of been expanding that because we don't have any housing out here in the West Plains. And so they've allowed that to expand into the valley. 10, 15 years ago, Air Force people could not live in the valley because it took them too long to get to the base if an alert was sounded. And so I think what we're kind of looking at, and what I'm looking at, is really what are the needs that we have out here in the West Plains area, for the type of housing. And I just come back to, we dealt with it, in the planning commission, with the issue over by Bimart. Those people didn't want to go into multifamily homes. They wanted to have their own little place. And so they had their trailers, and they didn't want to go into multifamily homes. And that's one of my concerns about what we talk about, is where we get this data from, that we need all of these, because we're hearing from our community members here. They don't want to be pushed into a multifamily place. They want their own little slice, no matter how small that slice may be.
Yeah, but what we want and what's sustainable and realistic for 40, 50 years down the road don't always align. So, and a lot of people in that neighborhood there's a handful of them that do own their trailer, but a lot of them are just renters as well. And sometimes renters aren't nearly as picky when it comes to whether it's an apartment or a trailer. But that is something that we need to take into consideration, though, is that it's not just single family homes. There's gonna be future growth that can't afford single family homes. They're talking about, what was it, 64% roughly needs to be 80% of the median income? That's pretty in line with what our current demographics already are here in Cheney. Like, I don't see that changing a whole lot, and us switching from 60% renter to 40% renter, 60% single family homeowner. I don't see that happening in 20, 30 years here.
I think one of the challenges too in this is equating income levels to housing types.
Yeah.
Because I think, if you're talking about like that Weimar, those are affordable homes, and they might not fit the state's definition of middle housing. But you could say, well, those can accommodate populations under 80% AMI. So that's something that we don't necessarily have to equate AMI categories with housing types. It's just a generalization that
Middle housing doesn't always mean that you're a renter. People will buy like a condo. You buy the unit. Like, there's other options for home ownership and ownership that don't necessarily rely on the traditional single family unit that we currently have. And we need to take that into consideration as we're moving forward, diversifying our housing stock as well.
but I do agree that sometimes what we want and what is feasible or needed don't always align. So that's the difficulty with, we do go to the community and highly value what the community wants. But then we look at, okay, how does that fit into the constraints and the measures that we need to meet? So I think there's always a balancing act there.
I have a question. AMI, is that based on city of Cheney, Spokane County?
Area median income, is that county? Yeah,
You might wanna look at Cheney specific because our demographics are so different. Our median income is different. It's not the same as like broadly the county, but I mean, it should be fairly close enough for 30,000.
Well, so a lot of the stuff we're seeing, so this whole middle housing that came out of House Bill 1110 2 years ago, and that forces all cities to have housing at different income levels, different housing types. Using your county level median income, even though Cheney skews a little bit lower, we have to, we're basically, so state right now. We'll have to, how we, and take it a step further, there's actually even provision in there right now. If your county doesn't certain income targets countywide, they will put a moratorium on the county on higher income homes. So there's all kinds of levels of this. We're just one piece of it, only 2.5–3% of the county population in the website. But this is all intermixed with all the other jurisdictions in the county. The county will kind of get the level that we want.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate your time tonight.
thank you.
Correct. Final word, you can go.
No, other than, said that, you know, the state, you know, the legislature is addressing, you know, housing, middle housing, and, you know, you never know what's gonna come next from that. You know, they're gonna definitely have an impact on what zoning can look like in all the cities across Washington. So we're keeping a close eye on that and, certainly factor that into the decisions that the council's gonna make with the comprehensive plans.
So if somebody wanted to testify for one of these, how would they best go about doing that? Should we reach out to our lobbyist and have her set it up?
You know,
do that?
we can reach out to Deborah, we can reach out to some of the bill sponsors or legislators, there's multiple ways to do that, but, you know, if you, for instance, like you just give me a call, and I'll talk to Deborah, we'll get you signed up. Yeah, Deborah's great about getting everybody, she does a lot of legwork for us, does it for us. All we have to do is get up there and it goes. Perfect.
Thank you.
Next steps, I guess, for the process is Brett have a plan.
I don't think if we're gonna start the process with comp plan, how far get slowly, because we've got some time, which.
We have bits and pieces, this land quantity analysis, and we start the process. It's not just sitting up and presenting a planning commission. If you take a look at our existing comprehensive plan, I encourage you to dive into that, at least the first chapter. Really pay attention to the policy making decisions. I mean, that's really all these little bits and pieces are going to be kind of guided into some policy decisions, some zoning decisions as we take a look at the next 20 years. Instead of trying to budget next year, 2025, and rush it into 2026. I think we have a lot of time for 2024, 2025. That's kind of the plan, is to take it over the next couple of years. This is kind of the first shot at it. You kind of see a little bit of the 50 park plan as we move towards updating our park plan. So you'll see little bits and pieces starting to come together. But yeah, take a look at it's on our website, the comprehensive plan, all the chapters that we have to take a look at. There are some new chapters that we may have to get into. We'll explain it when we get into planning commission as well. Not only that, we will have maybe special committees, some surveys as we go along. I mean, last plan, we got renderings, we got community involvement. We actually go and pay for some. You can get that from ad hoc committees. So you take a look at that tabletop exercise, just how much engagement we get is really how we do the process. We get zero engagement, up there alone, you know, staff's gonna try to make their best recommendation, but if we do get community involvement, that will take it a step further. Thank you.
Anything else?
Uh,
And thank you for your time.
Could we get this presentation emailed to us?
Yeah, you're gonna shoot that out to us. If it's
Yeah. you-
I will, I'll make sure that gets. Yeah.
Yeah, Danielle wanted to look at it too.
Okay, well, thank you all. I will adjourn this meeting. I appreciate your time.
When you screw that, when you mess it up. Yeah.